2009, an experienced explorer crawled headfirst into a narrow stone passage, exhaled to squeeze through a tiny gap, and suddenly realized he could never breathe in again. This is MrPhantom, and tonight we are diving into one of the most horrifying cave tragedies ever recorded. John Edward Jones was 26 years old, a medical student, a husband, a father to a baby girl less than a year old. By every account, he was the kind of person people remembered after meeting him once. Warm, enthusiastic, the kind of man who made everyone around him feel like the most important person in the room. He had his whole life mapped out in front of him, a career in medicine, a growing family, decades of mornings and meals and ordinary beautiful moments still waiting for him. On the night of November 24th, 2009, John went to Nutty Putty Cave in Utah with a group of friends and family members. It was Thanksgiving Eve. They were celebrating. They were together. They were happy. By the following morning, John Jones would be dying alone inside the earth, upside down, in a crack in the rock barely wider than a human body. And nothing that any person on the surface would do could bring him back. Nutty Putty Cave sits in Utah County, roughly 60 miles south of Salt Lake City. It is not a dramatic cavern with cathedral ceilings and underground rivers. It is the opposite of that. It is a hydrothermal cave formed millions of years ago by hot water dissolving through rock, leaving behind a maze of narrow, twisting passages that squeeze and compress and fold back on themselves in every direction. The cave was named for the soft, clay-like texture of its walls. Sections of it feel almost biological, like moving through the body of something ancient and indifferent. The cave had a complicated history even before John Jones arrived. It had been closed multiple times over the years due to safety concerns. In 2004, it was temporarily shut down. It was reopened in 2006 under new management and with new access restrictions, but it remained a challenging environment, the kind of place that demanded respect and experience. It was not a tourist attraction. It was a cave, and caves do not care who you are. John had been to Nutty Putty before. He was familiar with the environment. He was not a reckless person. He was not showing off. He was simply doing what people who love caves do. He was exploring, looking for new passages, following the natural human instinct to see what is around the next corner, through the next gap, beyond the next wall of stone. At some point during the evening, John separated slightly from the main group and entered a section of the cave that led towards a well-known passage called Bob's Push. Bob's Push was a famous squeeze in Nutty Putty, a notoriously tight section that experienced cavers navigated by pushing with their feet and exhaling completely to compress their chest enough to fit. It was a challenge. It was also a known, documented passage with a clear exit on the other side. But John did not enter Bob's Push. He entered a different passage, a passage that angled steeply downward, a passage that was not on any map, a passage that narrowed as it descended until it became approximately 10 inches wide and 18 inches tall, a crack in the earth barely large enough to admit a human body. And John was already inside it, headfirst, angled steeply downward when he realized something was wrong. He tried to back out. He could not. His body, angled sharply downward at roughly 70 degrees, had wedged itself into the passage. His arms were pinned partially ahead of him with a limited range of motion. His legs were above him, his feet somewhere behind and higher, completely unable to generate useful pushing force. Gravity was pulling every pound of him deeper into the crack, and the walls of that crack pressed against him from both sides, from the front, from everywhere. Stone that had been stone for millions of years and had no interest in moving now. He called out to his brother Josh, who was nearby in the cave system. Josh heard him and reached him quickly. He could see John's feet. He could hear John's voice, but he could not pull him out. The angle was wrong. The passage was too tight. John was wedged in a way that made simple pulling not just ineffective, but potentially dangerous. Josh went for help, and John Jones remained alone in the dark, upside down, in a crack in the earth, listening to his own breathing. Let us take a moment to understand what John's body was experiencing, because this is where the story becomes not just frightening, but physically harrowing in a way that is difficult to fully absorb. The human body is not designed to be inverted for extended periods. When you are upside down, your heart must work dramatically harder to pump blood against gravity, pushing it upward toward your feet rather than letting it fall naturally toward your core. The pressure this creates in the head and upper body is immediate and significant. Blood pools. Pressure builds behind the eyes, in the sinuses, in the temples. The sensation has been described by people who have experienced even brief inversions as an intense, throbbing, crushing feeling that begins almost immediately and worsens with every passing minute. it. But John's situation was far worse than simple inversion. The rock walls pressing against his chest restricted his ability to expand his lungs fully. Every breath was a partial breath. His diaphragm, the muscle that drives breathing, was working against both gravity and physical compression simultaneously. He was not suffocating, not yet, but every breath required more effort than the last, and he had been in this position for minutes that were already beginning to feel like hours, and it was completely dark. Cavers use headlamps, but John's position, wedged and compressed and inverted, made the management of light complicated at best. The darkness of an underground cave is not the darkness of a room with the lights off. It is absolute. It is the absence of every photon. It is a darkness so complete that your eyes, desperate for input, begin generating their own false signals. Phantom flickers at the edges of vision that are not light, but the visual cortex refusing to accept that light no longer exists. John Jones was alone, inverted, compressed, breathing in partial breaths, in absolute darkness, inside a crack in the earth, and no one could reach him. Emergency services were contacted. The call went out through Utah County Search and Rescue, and within hours, teams began arriving at the cave entrance. Cave rescue is one of the most technically demanding disciplines in emergency services. It requires specialized knowledge of underground navigation, rope systems, medical care in confined spaces, and the kind of psychological steadiness that allows a person to function effectively while surrounded by absolute darkness, compressed into spaces that trigger every primal alarm in the human nervous system. The rescuers who responded to Nutty Putty that night were experienced. They were skilled. They came with equipment and training and genuine determination to bring John Jones out of that cave alive. But the cave did not make it easy. Reaching John required navigating through the cave system to his location, which was itself a significant physical challenge. Then, working in his immediate vicinity meant operating in a space barely large enough for a single person, let alone multiple rescuers with equipment. Every rope, every pulley, every piece of hardware had to be hand-carried through the cave and assembled in conditions of near-complete physical restriction. The rescuers could see John. They could talk to him. They could hear his voice, and he could hear theirs. That communication line, that thin thread of human connection through the stone, was everything. It was the thing that kept both John and the rescuers anchored to the possibility of a solution. John was conscious. He was coherent. He was frightened, but not yet in the complete physical collapse that would come later. He spoke to rescuers. He spoke at some point to his wife Emily on a phone that was carefully passed to him through the passage. Emily was pregnant with their second child. She was outside the cave with family, waiting, trying to believe that her husband would come back out through that cave entrance the same way he had gone in. Those phone calls, the details of what John said to Emily, what she said to him, what they expressed to each other in the hours while rescuers worked, those details are private. They belong to Emily and to her family. But the fact of those calls, the image of a man wedged upside down inside the earth, pressing a phone against his ear to hear his wife's voice, is one of the most devastating images in this entire story. Hours passed. The rescue teams developed a plan involving a rope and pulley system that would be used to physically pull John upward and out of the passage, reversing the direction of his descent. This required anchoring equipment to the cave walls near John's position, which itself required significant technical work in an almost impossibly confined space. Ropes were threaded through the narrow passages. Hardware was assembled. Rescuers positioned themselves at multiple points in the cave system to serve as relay stations for the force being applied. They began to pull, and John began to move. This is the moment in the story where hope entered the cave, small and fragile and desperately wanted, but real. He was moving. The system was working. The people on the ropes were pulling, and John was coming upward, inch by inch, out of the crack that had taken him. And then the pulley system failed. A carabiner, a metal clip fundamental to the rope system, broke under the strain. The mechanical advantage that had been moving John was gone. He dropped back down into his position, and the hours of physical work, the carefully assembled rescue system, the rising hope of everyone involved, collapsed in a single mechanical failure. The rescuers rebuilt the system. They continued working, but the clock had been moving the entire time, and John's body had been inverted the entire time, and the physical toll of hours of inversion and compression was accumulating in ways that no amount of determination or technical skill could reverse. More than 24 hours had passed since John first entered that passage. The human body has limits, not limits of will, not limits of courage or character, or the desperate desire to survive. Physical limits, biological limits, the limits that exist in tissue and blood and muscle and organ function, regardless of what the mind demands. John had been inverted elevated for over a day. His heart had been fighting gravity for over a day. The blood pressure in his upper body had been elevated for over a day. His lungs had been partially compressed for over a day. At some point during the rescue operation, John lost consciousness. The rescuers did not stop. They continued working. They had not given up. They would not give up. But the body that they were trying to bring out of the earth had passed a threshold that no pulley system and no amount of human effort could address. John Edward Jones died inside Nutty Putty Cave on November 25, 2009. He was 26 years old. When the official determination was made that John had died, the rescuers, who had spent more than 24 hours in that cave, who had given everything they had physically and technically and emotionally, had to make their way back out through the passages and into the daylight. Some of them have spoken in the years since about the weight of that moment, about walking out of a cave knowing that a man was still inside it and would remain there, about the particular kind of grief that comes from having tried everything you know how to try and having it not be enough. Outside the cave, Emily Jones learned that her husband was gone. The decision was made by authorities in consultation with John's family that attempting to recover his body posed unacceptable risks to any rescuer who would need to enter the passage to attempt it. The geometry of where John was located, the angle, the compression, the depth within the cave system made recovery an operation that could very plausibly result in additional deaths, and so the decision was made. John Jones would remain in the cave. In December 2009, crews entered Nutty Putty Cave and permanently sealed it. They used concrete and fill to close the passages. The cave that had been open for exploration, that had drawn curious visitors and experienced cavers for years, was shut forever. Not temporarily closed, not closed pending review. Closed permanently, definitively, sealed into the earth, with John still inside. Nutty Putty Cave sits in Utah County today. Closed, sealed, unremarkable from the surface. There is nothing to mark it as anything other than the ground it sits on. But beneath that ground, in a passage approximately 10 inches wide and 18 inches tall, in the dark that has not changed since the moment the cave was sealed, John Jones remains. His family visits the site. They have spoken publicly about their grief and about their faith, which has sustained them through the years since his death. Emily Jones raised their daughter and gave birth to their second child after John died. She has spoken with extraordinary dignity and courage about the experience of losing her husband in the way that she lost him. The cave rescue community studied the Nutty Putty incident carefully in the years following John's death. Protocols were reviewed. The specific mechanical failure that caused the pulley system to break was analyzed. The question of how to prevent similar tragedies, how to build redundancy into rescue systems so that a single component failure does not collapse an entire operation, became part of the ongoing conversation in cave rescue training. None of that changes what happened.